Iran's air defense network is not weak. It covers the entire country. It runs on some of the most advanced missile systems Russia and China have ever exported. And on the morning of February 28, 2026, it failed to stop a single aircraft. That is the story worth understanding. Not the explosions, not the damage assessments, but the deeper question. How does a country with $800 million worth of air defense technology watch its own skies get shredded without landing a single shot? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. And once you see how modern stealth architecture is designed to operate against layered defense systems, you will also understand why Iran's problem is not fixable with more money. To understand what failed, you have to understand what Iran actually had. This was not a country with outdated anti-aircraft guns. Iran's integrated air defense system is built around three core layers. The outer layer is the S-300PMU2. Russia delivered these systems in 2016 after a decade of sanctions held them up. The S-300PMU2 is a long-range, high-altitude surface-to-air missile system with a detection range of up to 300 kilometers against conventional aircraft. It is the same family of systems that NATO spent the better part of 3 decades trying to find a countermeasure for. The middle layer is the Bavar 373, Iran's domestically developed system, modeled on the S-300, designed to fill coverage gaps and add redundancy to their national grid. The inner layer is a mix of shorter-range systems. The Russian Tor-M1 for terminal defense of high-value sites, Chinese HQ-9 batteries acquired through back channels, and older Hawk systems left over from the Shah era that Iranian engineers have kept running for decades longer than anyone expected. On paper, this is a serious, layered, overlapping defense network, the kind that took careful decades of procurement and integration to build, the kind that would destroy a conventional aircraft long before it reached a target. The problem is that none of it was designed to fight what showed up on February 28th. Every air defense system works the same way at its core. Radar finds the target. A fire control system calculates the intercept. The missile launches. But that chain only works if the radar can find the target in the first place. The F-22 Raptor has a radar cross-section roughly the size of a marble. Not a small aircraft, a marble. The F-35 is slightly larger at approximately the size of a golf ball. Compared to a conventional fighter, which might register at several square meters, these numbers are not a marginal improvement. They represent a fundamentally different category of problem for any radar operator trying to track them. But here is where most coverage misses the critical point. Stealth alone did not defeat Iran's air defense. Stealth created the conditions for everything else to work. Hours before the first Tomahawk left its tube, the frequency war had already started. Iran's radar operators were not looking at clean screens that morning. They were looking at degraded, fragmented, contradicted data. And that confusion was deliberate. EA-18G Growlers operating from the carrier strike groups in the Arabian Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean are purpose-built for one job: denying the enemy the ability to think clearly. Their jamming pods can flood specific radar frequency bands with noise, making returns from aircraft indistinguishable from background clutter. Where Iran's S-300 operators expected clean returns, they were getting interference they could not source, could not locate, and could not remove. The F-35 added another layer to that problem. Unlike older aircraft that required external jamming support, the F-35 carries internal electronic attack capability. Each F-35 that entered Iranian airspace was not just invisible to radar. It was actively degrading the radar network around it as it moved. Targeting data that the S-300 needed to function was being poisoned at the source. And above all of this, at 50,000 feet, the F-22 was maintaining what can only be described as a kill zone. Any Iranian interceptor that attempted to climb into the fight would have been acquired, tracked, and eliminated before its pilot completed a single targeting solution. The Raptor does not give an adversary a second chance. At that altitude, at that speed, with that sensor suite, it operates in a category that Iran's MiG-29s and aging F-14s have no answer for. There is a concept called SEAD, Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses. In older warfare models, SEAD meant flying dedicated aircraft directly into the threat envelope to destroy radar sites and missile batteries before the main strike package arrived. It worked, but it was expensive. On February 28th, SEAD was not a separate phase of the operation. It was baked into the architecture before the aircraft even crossed the border. HARM missiles, the high-speed anti-radiation missile, home in on radar emissions. The moment an Iranian radar operator chose to illuminate a target, that radar became the target. Every system that turned on to search for the incoming strike was advertising its own location to munitions already in the air, waiting for exactly that signal. The choice became impossible. Stay blind and miss the strike package, or go active and die. Many chose to stay dark. And a radar that is not transmitting cannot guide a missile to anything. Consider what it looked like from inside an Iranian Air Defense Command Center that morning. An S-300 battery commander has one job: watch the screen, identify the threat, engage. The system is designed around that sequence. It requires clean radar data, functioning communications with adjacent batteries, and a command structure that can process information and issue orders faster than the incoming strike can move. On February 28th, none of those conditions existed. The radar returns were fragmented and contradicted by jamming. Communications links between batteries were disrupted. The picture was incomplete, changing every few seconds, and impossible to validate against neighboring sites, because neighboring sites were seeing the same degraded data. The order to engage, when it came, was based on an intelligence picture that was hours behind reality. The targets those orders were written for had already moved. This is the part of electronic warfare that rarely gets discussed. It does not just blind the hardware, it breaks the human decision loop that the hardware depends on. When a radar operator cannot trust what the screen is telling him, and when the commander 3 steps up the chain cannot validate the picture either, the entire engagement sequence stalls. And in a high-tempo strike environment, stalling for 30 seconds is the same as never firing at all. Here is the strategic reality that February 28th made visible. Iran built an air defense network optimized for the threats of the 1990s and 2000s. The United States spent the last 3 decades building aircraft specifically designed to defeat those defenses. This was not a miscalculation on Iran's part. It was a technology race, and the race was decided long before the first aircraft took off. Low-frequency VHF radars can theoretically provide some detection of stealth aircraft. They operate in a frequency range where the shaping geometry of 5th-generation jets is less effective. But there is a critical distinction that Iran, like most S-300 operators, runs into immediately. Detection is not targeting. A VHF radar might see something in a general area. It cannot provide the precise, continuous track data that a fire control system needs to put a missile on a specific aircraft at a specific altitude, moving at a specific speed. The gap between seeing something and killing it is the gap that stealth exploits. What happened over Iranian airspace on February 28th was not a close contest. It was the live demonstration of a system designed, built, tested, and refined specifically for this type of environment, and it performed exactly as designed. The harder question is what comes next, because the adversaries watching that morning were not just Iran. And every Air Force still operating legacy radar-centric defenses is now running exactly the same calculation about whether their own systems would hold up against the same architecture. That question does not have a comfortable answer.